They told Admiral Harris she was just a secretary playing dress-up. They told him she didn't belong in the officers' club. But when the arrogance faded and the truth came out, the most powerful man in the Navy didn't just apologize. He hit the floor. This is the story of the hidden warrior. The chandeliers of the crystal ballroom at the Norfolk Naval Station were vibrating, not from the wind outside, but from the boisterous laughter of Admiral Marcus Harris. He was a man who occupied space aggressively, broad-shouldered, decorated with a fruit salad of ribbons that stretched from his collarbone to his pocket, and possessing a voice that sounded like gravel grinding in a cement mixer. Harris was old Navy. He believed in steel hulls, big guns, and that the SEAL teams were a fraternity where no woman would or should ever set foot. Tonight was the Trident Gala, a celebration of special warfare operations. The room was a sea of dress whites and dinner blues. Champagne flowed like water. At the center of it all, holding a tumbler of 30-year-old Scotch, Harris was holding court with a group of sycophantic junior officers. "I'm telling you," Harris bellowed, gesturing with his cigar, "the standards are slipping. You let the rigorous training soften, you let the wrong elements in, and the Trident means nothing. It becomes jewelry. We need killers, not diplomats." The junior officers nodded, terrified to disagree. That was when the room's temperature seemed to drop. Walking through the double mahogany doors was a woman. She was striking, but not in the way the other spouses or dates were. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, tight bun. She wore a simple, unadorned female Navy dress blue uniform. No ribbons, no warfare pins, no name tag. Just the rank insignia of a lieutenant commander on her sleeve, a respectable rank, but invisible compared to the brass surrounding Harris. She walked with a limp. It was slight, barely noticeable, but to a trained eye, it spoke of a femur that had been shattered and bolted back together. She moved toward the bar, ordering a club soda. Harris's eyes narrowed. He didn't recognize her. In his mind, a lieutenant commander with a bare chest, no ribbons, at a gala for war heroes meant one thing. She was an administrative hire, a paper pusher who had likely politicked her way onto the guest list to snag a husband. "Watch this," Harris whispered to his entourage, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He sauntered over, his physical presence looming over her at the bar. He tapped the bar top aggressively. "You look lost, Lieutenant Commander," Harris said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "The spouses' auxiliary meeting is in the annex building. This room is for the operators." The woman turned slowly. Her eyes were a piercing, icy gray. They didn't flinch. They didn't show fear. They looked at Harris the way a wolf looks at a noisy squirrel. "I'm exactly where I need to be, Admiral," she said. Her voice was soft, raspy, as if her vocal cords had once been exposed to smoke or screaming. Harris laughed, looking back at his group for validation. "Is that so? No ribbons? No warfare pin? You're wearing a uniform, but you look like you've never left a desk in the Pentagon. What's your name, sailor?" "Jane. Clara Jane." "Well, Clara." Harris emphasized her first name, stripping away her rank. "This event is for those who have bled for the Trident. It's strictly for the elite. I don't recall seeing your name on the VIP list, and I certainly don't see any hardware on your chest to justify you breathing the same air as these men." He leaned in closer, smelling of alcohol and arrogance. "So, why don't you be a good girl, grab your club soda, and head to the lobby? You're lowering the property value of the room." The music in the room seemed to stop. Nearby conversations died out. Everyone was watching the 3-star Admiral dress down the unknown female officer. Clara took a sip of her soda. She set the glass down with a deliberate clink. "I was invited, Admiral. By the White House." Harris roared with laughter. "The White House? Did they need someone to take notes? Listen, I'm going to ask you once to leave before I have the Master-at-Arms escort you out for stolen valor or impersonating an officer. You aren't a warrior." Clara turned her whole body to face him. The limp was gone. Her posture was lethal. "You're right, Admiral. I'm not a warrior. I'm the one they send when the warriors die." To understand the tension in that ballroom, you have to understand the history that Admiral Harris didn't know. 6 years prior, the Navy had initiated a black budget program authorized by an executive order that never made the press. It was called Project Genesis. The goal was to find an operator who could blend into environments where a 6'4" linebacker SEAL would stick out like a sore thumb. They needed a ghost. Clara Jane wasn't just a female sailor. She was an Olympic-level biathlete and a language prodigy before she enlisted. She had passed Bud S, basic underwater demolition, SEAL training, not with the main class, but at night in a separate classified rotation known as the cellar. The standards weren't lowered for her, they were tripled. While Harris was sitting in air-conditioned tactical operations centers, Clara was in the Hindu Kush. The flashback that played in Clara's mind as she looked at the Admiral was vivid. It was Operation Silent Night, Yemen, 3 years ago. A SEAL team, Harris's own Team 6, had been pinned down in a valley by an overwhelming insurgent force. They were out of ammo, out of water, and their communications were jammed. Harris, commanding the operation from a carrier in the Gulf, had made the hard call. "Scrub the rescue," Harris had said over the comms back then. "The risk is too high. We can't lose a second bird. They are on their own." He had signed the death warrants of 12 men to save his career statistics, but the White House had a different asset in the region. Clara, operating solo under the call sign Valkyrie, was inserted via a halo, high-altitude low opening, jump from 30,000 feet, 5 miles offset from the target. She didn't carry a heavy machine gun. She carried a suppressed sniper rifle and a laser designator connected to a suborbital drone prototype. For 14 hours, Clara crawled through cactus and jagged rocks. She eliminated the enemy jammer crews one by one, using a knife to keep the noise down. She breached the perimeter of the enemy stronghold, not by blowing the door, but by climbing a sheer cliff face without ropes. When she reached the pinned-down SEALs, they were preparing a suicide charge. They were shocked to see a lone figure emerge from the shadows. She didn't speak. She simply handed the team leader a fresh sat phone and took a position on the ridge. "Rain," she whispered into her headset. For the next 20 minutes, she orchestrated a symphony of destruction. She called in strikes so precise they vaporized enemies standing 5 feet from the friendly forces. She single-handedly held the northern flank, taking a bullet through the thigh, the injury that caused her limp today, but never leaving her scope. She got all 12 men out. When the dust settled, the team leader asked for her name. She didn't give it. She vanished back into the desert before the extract choppers landed. The official report, signed by Admiral Harris, claimed the team fought their way out due to superior tactical leadership. He took the credit. He got a medal. He never knew that the guardian angel, mentioned in the classified annex, was the woman standing in front of him, holding a club soda. The silence that descended upon the crystal ballroom was not merely quiet. It was heavy, a physical weight that pressed against the eardrums. The clinking of silverware, the murmur of polite conversation, and the string quartet in the corner had all ceased instantly. 300 pairs of eyes were locked on the mahogany bar, where Admiral Marcus Harris, the king of the Navy's special operations, was attempting to crush a lone, limping woman. Harris's face was a mask of flushed, triumphant indignation. To him, this was no longer about regulations. It was about territory. A predator does not like strange scents in its den. "The one they send when warriors die?" Harris repeated, his voice booming to the back of the hall so that even the valets outside might hear. "That is the most melodramatic, self-important line I have heard in 40 years of service. You aren't a ghost, Clara. You're a distraction." He snapped his fingers, a sharp, dismissive crack that echoed in the stillness. He gestured imperiously toward the double doors where 2 shore patrol officers, hulking master-at-arms with sidearms, stood watch. "Security," Harris barked. "Escort this individual off the base immediately. Charge her with Article 106, impersonating an officer. Strip that uniform off her if you have to, but get her out of my sight." The 2 shore patrol officers marched forward, their boots thudding rhythmically on the parquet floor. They were young, perhaps 22, trained to obey stars and bars without question. But as they closed the distance to the bar, they faltered. They stopped 5 feet away from Clara. It was an instinctual hesitation, the kind a hiker feels when they stumble upon a coiled rattlesnake. Clara hadn't moved. She hadn't reached for a weapon. She hadn't even turned to face them. She simply continued to watch Harris, her hand resting casually near her glass of club soda. But there was a kinetic static radiating from her, a dormant violence that the young guards, fresh from training, recognized in their gut. "I wouldn't do that, boys," a voice rumbled from the shadows of a decorative pillar. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Stepping into the light was Master Chief Petty Officer Bull O'Malley. If Harris was the political power of the Navy, Bull O'Malley was its soul. A man carved from granite, with a neck thicker than most men's thighs, and a rack of medals that included the Navy Cross. He was the Command Master Chief of the entire Naval Special Warfare Command. He was the one man in the room whom Harris could not bully. "Master Chief," Harris snapped, his patience fraying. "Do not interfere. This woman is a fraud." Bull walked past the Admiral, ignoring him entirely, and stopped next to Clara. He didn't look at her with the disdain Harris showed. He looked at her with a terrifying mix of fear and awe. He looked at her the way a deeply religious man looks at an avenging angel. "Sir," Bull said, his voice low and gravelly, addressing Harris but keeping his eyes locked on the floor near Clara's boots. "You are making a mistake, a career-ending mistake." Harris laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "My career is bulletproof, Master Chief. I'm cleaning up the trash. Now stand aside." "Ask her," Bull whispered, the urgency in his voice cutting through the Admiral's arrogance. "Ask to see her coin." "Her coin?" Harris sputtered, incredulous. "I don't care about some challenge coin she bought at the Naval Academy gift shop. I don't care if she has a coin from the Pope." "Ask her rank, sir," Bull insisted, stepping closer to the Admiral, breaking protocol to save his superior from oblivion. "But not the rank on her sleeve. Ask her for her designation." Harris sneered, looking from Bull to the silent woman. He felt the eyes of the room on him. He needed to finish this. He needed to humiliate her so thoroughly that no one would ever question his authority again. "Fine," Harris spat. He turned his body fully toward Clara, leaning in so close that spittle flew from his lips. "Let's play the Master Chief's game. You're wearing Lieutenant Commander stripes, a nice mid-level rank. Safe, boring. But apparently, according to Bull here, you're something else." He grinned, cruel and shark-like. "So, tell me, Clara, as a joke, to entertain the troops before we throw you in the brig, what is your rank?" Clara finally moved. The motion was slow, deliberate, and fluid. She reached her right hand into the pocket of her dress-blue jacket. The shore patrol officers flinched, hands hovering over their holsters. The room held its breath. Was she pulling a gun? A knife? She withdrew her hand. Held within her fingers was a small object, wrapped in black velvet. She placed it on the polished wood of the bar. It made a sound, a heavy, dull thud that was disproportionate to its size. It sounded like a bag of lead shot hitting a table. It was dense. "My rank on the books is Lieutenant Commander," Clara said. Her voice had changed. The rasp was still there, but the softness was gone. It was now the voice of a commander addressing a subordinate. It projected command authority that stripped the air from the room. "But my operational authority falls under Executive Order 1399, signed into law under the classified annex of the National Defense Act." She reached out with a single finger and unrolled the black velvet. It wasn't a coin. It was a medallion, larger than a palm, forged from solid platinum. It caught the light of the chandelier and seemed to swallow it. On the obverse side was the presidential seal, deeply engraved. But it was the reverse side that made the blood run cold in the veins of the senior officers present. It depicted a human skull wearing a trident, but the trident was inverted, pointing down. Above the skull were 3 stars, but they were not arranged in a line, like a vice admiral's. They were arranged in a tight triangle, the symbol of the Trinity Command. "In the theater of war," Clara continued, her eyes locking onto Harris's soul, "when the black flag is raised and the conventional rules of engagement are suspended, the chain of command dissolves." She tapped the platinum medallion. "My designation is Fleet Commander." A collective gasp, audible and sharp, rippled through the 300 guests. Harris froze. His brain tried to reject the information, but his training wouldn't let him. Fleet Commander was not a standard naval rank found in the Blue Jackets manual. It was a ghost story. It was a mythological designation dating back to the height of the Cold War, revived for the darkest corners of the War on Terror. The rumors said that a fleet commander was an operative granted temporary, absolute dictatorial power over all military assets in a specific hemisphere during a crisis. A fleet commander could commandeer a carrier strike group, order a nuclear launch, or relieve a 4-star admiral of duty on the spot without a court-martial. It was a title held by only one active operative at a time, the break glass in case of apocalypse option. Harris stared at the medallion. He had seen the briefings on the Shadow Fleet. He had signed the non-disclosure agreements regarding the Trinity Command, but he had always assumed it was a theoretical framework, a paper tiger created by paranoid politicians. He never thought the fleet commander was a real person, and he certainly never imagined it would be a woman with a limp and no ribbons. That's impossible," Harris stammered, his voice losing its boom, reducing to a dry croak. "The fleet commander is a myth, a contingency plan, and even if they existed, they would be—" "A man?" Clara finished for him, her voice cutting like a razor. "Because you think testosterone pulls the trigger. The bullets don't know the difference, Marcus." She used his first name. It hit him like a physical slap. "And neither did the 12 men I saved in the Arhob Valley in Yemen," she whispered. "The men who were pinned down, the men who were screaming for air support, the men you wrote off." Harris's face went the color of old ash. The room spun. The pieces slammed together in his mind with the force of a car crash. 3 years ago. Operation Silent Night. He had ordered the abandonment of SEAL Team 6 to save his own statistics, claiming the risk was too high. Then, a guardian angel had intervened, an unknown sniper asset who had rained godlike destruction on the enemy and saved his career. He had taken the credit for their survival. "You," Harris wheezed, clutching the edge of the bar for support. "You were the asset. You were Valkyrie." "I was the one who cleaned up your mess, Admiral," Clara said, leaning in. Her grey eyes were merciless. "I took a 7.62 armor-piercing round through my femur holding that ridge so your boys could come home to their wives. I didn't do it for the ribbons. That's why I don't wear them. I wear the scars. And I carry the weight of the command you were too cowardly to hold." She tapped the platinum medallion one last time. "Now," she said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "do you still want to call security? Or should I make a phone call to the president and explain why his fleet commander is being harassed by a bureaucrat in a fancy suit?" The reality hit Admiral Harris like a freight train. He realized three things simultaneously. 1. He had just insulted the most lethal operative in the US Navy. 2. She held a clearance level that could strip him of his command with a single phone call. 3. She was the savior of his own reputation. If the truth about Yemen came out, that he ordered the abandonment, he would be court-martialed. She had kept his secret by saving his men. His heart hammered against his ribs. The air in the room felt too thin. The arrogance that held his spine straight evaporated. Harris tried to speak, but only a wheeze came out. He clutched his chest, his eyes rolling back. "Admiral!" a junior officer shouted. Harris's knees buckled. He collapsed, hitting the carpeted floor with a heavy thud, his medals clinking together, a hollow sound compared to the platinum medallion sitting on the bar. Medics rushed from the side of the room. Clara didn't move to help him. She wasn't a medic. She was a soldier. She simply watched, her expression unreadable. As they loosened Harris's tie and checked his vitals, it was a severe panic attack, induced by shock. The rest of the room turned to Clara. There was an awkward silence. The old Navy didn't know how to react to the new reality. Then, Master Chief Bull O'Malley stepped forward. He walked right up to Clara. He didn't care about the dress blues or the lack of ribbons. He snapped his heels together. The sound cracked like a whip. He rendered a slow, sharp hand salute. "Fleet Commander," Bull said, his voice thick with emotion. One by one, the other SEALs in the room, men who had been on that ridge in Yemen, men who had heard the rumors of the Valkyrie, stepped forward. Lieutenants, captains, ensigns, the younger generation who respected the fight more than the image. They formed a circle around her. They saluted. Clara looked at them. For the first time, her icy mask cracked. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. She didn't return the salute, as she was technically out of uniform for her true rank. But she nodded. "At ease," she said softly. She picked up her platinum medallion, wrapped it back in the velvet, and put it in her pocket. She left the club soda on the bar. "I think I'll head to that annex building now," she said to the room. "I hear the company is better." She turned and walked out, her limp slightly more pronounced as the adrenaline faded, leaving a room full of stunned officers and the unconscious Admiral in her wake. Admiral Harris recovered physically, but his career did not. 2 weeks later, he submitted his resignation, citing health reasons. Clara Valkyrie Jane never claimed credit for Yemen. She never did interviews. But every year at the Trident Gala, there is always a glass of club soda left at the end of the bar, reserved for the fleet commander, just in case she stops by. True power isn't about the stripes on your sleeve or how loud you shout. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice in the dark when no one is watching. Clara Jane taught the Navy that heroes don't always look like the posters. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that respect is earned, not demanded. What would you have done if you were Clara? Let us know in the comments below.